Peter Zila in the house.
Bob, good to see you.
Yeah, you made it in the snow, man.
Yeah, a little bit snow.
A little slippery. No, it's all the other idiots you had to watch out for, right?
Well, they go in the ditch all by themselves. You don't have to watch out for them.
Let's get into an argument about cleaning.
Let's get an argument about cleaning, yes.
Okay. Here's some 1/8 inch. And I have, when I was cutting it with the cutoff wheel, I just took the burr off and I kind of hit it like that. I know that that's not cool because you can impregnate the oxide down into the material.
Well, anything, in my opinion, anything when you do the cleaning with power tools causes a risk of embedding crud into the material. It melts it's liquid at 1200 degrees, 1220, whatever, but it gets soft way before that.
Oh.
And if you have a power tool and you press on it and it develops heat, you take the crud from the material surface and massage it into the now soft aluminum.
Right.
I'm a friend of hand manual tools like a file or a hand wire brush in order to clean this.
This guy right here still has a little bit of a burr, and I want to take that off. I don't know what that is. It looks like tape, and to me that's an impurity that I wouldn't want in there. So hand brush.
Hand stainless steel brush, probably.
Now why stainless?
Why stainless? Because you don't want to have any ferrous metal contaminating your non-ferrous aluminum.
Right, and if I did that with a stainless or a carbon steel brush, then I take that chance of
well, I've seen people do this with the oily and greasy brush too, and they thought they did good. I mean, and I've seen people with the carbon brush, if it was new out of the package, and like do okay with it.
Brush it in one direction and never...
Is it the right thing to do? Not according to textbook. Can it be done if that's the only brush you have? I suppose so.
See, I'm not confident with that. So I'm going to reach down here and maybe grab a piece of sandpaper or something.
There you go.
And work that off there.
Cold manual application, same thing. Now, if you would have like a really slow speed drill with like a Scotch-Brite pad or so, where you don't build up the heat like with the grinder at 11,000 RPM.
I don't like 11,000 RPM. I like variable speed and low, really low these days. I can feel an abrasive cut. I can feel it, and I have control over it, and I don't.
Well, you can, but a lot of guys out there can't.
They're impatient. Everybody wants to.
Yes, they're missing experience and dexterity, and they just ram that thing in. Everything heats up, and they're massaging the oxides and the impurities right into the part.
So having said that, if I just took pieces like this, that minor scratches and they have that fairly shiny surface. Now this one I wouldn't care for because it's got the Sharpie lines across it, but this and another surface that's just...
Like, yeah, this one looks
like that.
It looks clean. For all intended purposes, it looks clean.
But if I brush this, it would become dull. Now what happens with that? So I can take my finger and I got that graphite looking stuff.
Yeah, so
that's an oxide that
there's an oxide that comes off. Aluminum builds an oxide almost instantaneously in a matter of less than a minute. If you brush it, new oxides with the
atmosphere,
with the moisture and the atmosphere, it builds a new oxide layer to protect itself. It's a function of protection.
Sure.
And you have aluminum. I never really understood how the oxide works. I attended a seminar at some point by a very knowledgeable Miller guy, and he broke it down for me so I could understand this, where aluminum always has oxide. Yes. Why do we clean it? Well, we clean it to remove the oxide. Well, not really, because it forms within less than a minute. So I clean it now. I grab the welding gun. By the time I'm ready to weld, I have oxide on it. So why clean it? And he says, that's different. You have the dry kind of oxide, which builds right away, instantaneously, from the mill as you make it.
It's the same depth in that time space. If we clean it in that time, we're about that same thickness of
so
oxide.
the dry oxide is anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 micron. And it builds, that 2 micron builds within a minute. And that 4 maybe builds within a year. So I mean, you're still there. You still have your.
It's about the
you
same
still
thing.
have your layer there.
Micron, but then.
And then what happens when the aluminum looks clean like this? In my mind, it's clean. When the aluminum has these white spots on here like that, or like this here, so now your aluminum lays outside in the, you say, okay, so aluminum never rusts, right? So chuck it outside in the shop in the rain. You'll let it lay behind your shop for like 3 months.
Or something's on top of it.
Or something is on top of it, and moisture goes in between. Piece of cardboard.
Yeah, cardboard.
Cardboard absorbs the moisture, then dumps it onto the, and then what happens is it gets kind of like white. And when you scrape that white off, it almost looks like salt. That's salt, like that aluminum corrosion. And this is the same oxide that you have on this one, but it's wet. This is the dry oxide. This is the wet oxide. The wet oxide can grow to unlimited thickness.
I've seen
so, and the more oxide you have, the harder it gets to weld through. Like your cleaning action on your welding machine is not going to do anything for you anymore.
You're just folding it over and that stuff is still down inside there.
Because the oxide layer melts at 3,800 Fahrenheit. The material underneath melts at 1,200-ish. Yeah. Yes.
So, I mean, I've seen aluminum that's sat outside. You bring it in to clean it up, and it's got like deep pock. That's what you're talking about, that deep, wet, go to infinity type.
Yes, so I just did a semi-truck fuel tank. And where the straps are, where the rubber straps are, it traps the moisture underneath.
Sure.
And it's like a crater. If for me, and again, people say, "Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that." That's not textbook. I sandblast this. The reason why I pick sandblasting is it's cold. It doesn't do like the grinder. It doesn't heat up. It's fresh. I used crushed glass as a media.
All right.
And the sand, the crushed glass digs into those pockets, cleans all the oxides out of these pockets, and leaves little nice clean craters to weld.
All right.
And as soon as the glass is contaminated, it gets blown away and replaced with new clean glass. So in my mind, it's a viable option to clean that type of
I've done the same.
Contamination.
It comes out nice and dull. I mean, you can tell there's nothing there except if I TIG weld over the top of it, I've got little sparklies of glass that are exploding, that are impregnated. And I've cleaned those, but it seems like they're just a little bit behind.
Yes.
That it's alarming to me. The weld comes out okay. It kind of goes.
And you fix the leak on the fuel tank. You know, it's not a showpiece. It's not like...
Right. It's functional and structurally strong.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we don't need to do a whole lot. We just need to be mindful of burrs and, like you said, places like these.
Yeah, like most of this in this box is like
that's good looking
clean
material.
for all intended purposes. It was kept inside, indoors, in an air-conditioned room. There is really no oxide layer that I need to brush.
But if we go across this, we may or may not see something from this cut surface.
Yes, from the cutoff wheel, maybe embedded in there.
Well, we'll try it.
Potentially.
We'll try it.
But even then, so let's talk about how cleaning action works. I mean, on TIG, everybody knows by now, you typically use AC power, and the AC switches the direction of the flow of electricity.
Electron flow.
And it kind of blasts the oxide layer off when it comes from the material towards the torch.
That'd be the EP
that would be
side
the
of the
EP side, the positive side.
Lifting,
Negative side is penetration, positive side is cleaning. So on a MIG machine, you typically don't have AC.
Right.
It's typically DC only. And the way how you weld aluminum is DC electrode positive. So essentially, you have cleaning all the time. The electricity always comes from the negative, from the ground clamp, from the workpiece out into the wire. And your argon gas is what blasts. This is why you also need higher flow rate, like 40 or 50 on the flow rate. Blasts the impurities away.
But isn't the argon is inert, but is not ionized to a point where it's doing anything? It's protecting the weld pool, protecting the material, but there's no real reaction.
There's no real reaction with it. It's just a function of blowing the contaminants away to a degree too. That's why the pushing action of the gun helps you a lot more to blow these contaminants away than pulling. You blowing the contaminants in the still hot, potentially liquid weld back into the pool.
Black soot.
Yes, and that's when you get black black soot inclusions, pepper inclusions, pinhole inclusions, blowing it back on top of the molten weld puddle.
Okay.
That's why you move forward in a pushing motion.
I'm going to challenge you. Next thing I'm going to ask, why is it black soot on helium? Even when you're doing it right, when you're TIG welding aluminum and you start out and it's like a orange haze and you got this black soot covering
I would think impurities too that are in or on top of the aluminum.
But it's always there. I mean,
the oxide layer is always there, even if you clean it.
But
I'm
talking about the black soot part of it. For helium, done correctly, I mean, as soon as you strike an arc of TIG and you're on the helium gas, you got to go, and you really can't see much. It's like a orange haze. Yeah. And a black soot it's left behind.
Done it before.
And you think you're doing it wrong, but then you clean that crap off of there and it's going, wow, that's a good looking weld, you know?
Yes.
So where does that come from? Is that just something, the function of the helium, or? I don't know either.
I don't know.
Well, we'll figure it out in another video.
In another video, yes.
All right.